Hey, all, welcome back to the Awesome Life podcast with another awesome guest, Don Schmincke.
Schmincke, it's hard. It's a hard German name. It's like Italian, and I've learned since I was 5 years old. It will never translate into English, but that's good. That's close enough.
I apologize, but if you've listened to any of our podcasts, guys out there, they recognize I really botch last names, but it doesn't mean that my heart is not connected with you. And that's what this program is all about, connecting people and women who are in transition, who are looking for resources, for advice, for inspiration to move ahead and become the amazing leaders that you are. You absolutely are. And Don is an author. He's a researcher. He's an explorer. I love it. I love it. And when we talked earlier, because of course, I always like to talk to my podcast guests before I have them, make sure that we are on the same wavelength. And I invite people to join me because of the energy involved. So come on over to the YouTube and watch us on there, because you will see the energy of this fellow. He is a lot of fun. His smile is integrating and inviting, and I love it. So Don, you are a leader, an explorer. You are a researcher extraordinaire, and you live in Maryland, where I used to live many long years ago when I was first married. So tell me more. Tell me, how did you become all of these amazing things?
I don't know. I was totally unpredicted. I almost dropped out of high school, and until the police told me I had to repeat the 12th grade, and then it was like, oh crap, I'm not gonna do that. So they said, well, you got like 60 days to do the entire senior year, which I did. I mean, teachers rallied around me. It was kind of cool. And I ended up getting out of there. And I was in rock bands. And so I was working at my uncle's gas station, and I noticed all the guys with the fancy cars had education. So I thought maybe I should get an education. Okay. And there was a community college up the street. And I realized they didn't care whether I showed up or not. They got my money. So I thought, well, I really can't hook community college. What was really funny is and when I was there were a couple of retired people from Cambridge. Like, one was a physicist, and another, her husband, she was at a BU. He went to MIT, and they told me, apparently if they saw something I didn't see, that I should apply to MIT, and I didn't know what that was. I thought, is that a trade school? I mean, what's MIT? And so I applied, and they put me through a battery of tests and all kind of things, and I ended up getting in.
Wow, that's a tough school to get into too. My uncle went there. Yeah.
Oh yeah. But it gave me access to an amazing amount of areas of research, and I started off with electrical engineering and computer science in the early days of AI, and got bored, so I did an integrated degree in planetary physics. So I ended up really becoming a planetary physicist, and then I worked on inertial guidance systems for like the nuclear missile program, and then I automated the Harvard MIT biomedical lab. So what I'm saying is all that's happening because I have ADHD, so it's hard for me to stay focused on one thing.
Oh, oh, wow. And you accomplished all of that with ADHD. We were just talking about that.
Well, because if you don't have that, you can't integrate diverse concepts and thoughts. So that's why a lot of entrepreneurs have ADHD, because they can do that. Like for breakfast, they're changing the world in their head because your brain's moving much faster. It's just not necessarily smarter, just faster. And anyway, long story short, I ended up getting involved with studying humans, because in the Harvard MIT biomedical lab, I started hooking myself up to these instruments, and I started getting interested in the body, and actually got published in that research. But I went to Hopkins and started studying human grouping behaviors, and that got me attached to the MBA work there in the graduate school. So that's when I ran into a lot of executives, and they were complaining about the high failure rate of management theory. So I went into that, and next thing I know, I'm publishing in that area. And then Oxford gave me permission to use a manuscript they had that was 700-year-old. It was published maybe 500 years ago, but it was capturing the whole samurai management tradition for how do you.
Oh, cool.
And so I published that, and then it went into a dozen languages, and then I'm on CNN. All of a sudden, things take off. So that's what I do now. I fund research in terms of my own expeditions around the world. I like visiting remote regions to understand humans and how they lead, and because I'm looking for biological leadership elements. And so I guess I've trained about 30,000 CEOs now over the
Wow.
years. So I have a new book that I'm going to be coming out with, where I'm taking some of that and applying it toward entrepreneur development. So it's
I
cool.
love
I have a lot of great friends, a lot of brilliant people I've met, and been very fortunate to get out of the gas station and be here.
Get out of the gas station. I love it. Yeah, I think you may have accomplished that. So yeah, it's all about the leadership and who you surround yourself with. And you certainly have surrounded yourself with the people to help encourage you and move you forward, and how to handle the ADHD so that you can actually thrive, not just survive. How do you can grow and transform your life. And you're also showing, and I love this, Dawn, that you don't have to be stuck. You don't have to make a lifelong decision and stay in that place and say, this is all I'm going to do for the rest of my life.
Yeah. I mean, I recreated myself many different times, only because sometimes I hit walls that weren't going to work, and so I went in a different direction. Other times I just got interested by something that came out of left field that I wasn't even expecting, and did that. So a lot of the work, I would never think I'd be getting into like genetics, evolutionary psychology, and all that. But it's fascinating to me. And then I end up have these brilliant people that want to hang out with me, and like evolutionary psychology was just amazing. We've been able to use a lot of that in corporations and leadership development. But then I started interacting with Dr. David Buss, he left Harvard. He's running the lab at University of Boston, pioneering evolutionary psychology. So I'm really grateful and to have the privilege to meet with some just really fun and brilliant people. And I learned so much, and I try to write and share the knowledge.
So do you have any suggestions or tips for our audience that could help them recognize their leadership, their transformation is all for the good? I mean, I know that, that, but a lot of our listeners are saying, come on, I'm not there. I couldn't go to MIT, Oxford. Where on earth is Oxford? Let alone imagining that you could see a 700-year-old manuscript. But being able to, what sort of attitude or thought process or tips might you have for our listeners that may be in this transitional way to become a leader? Because heaven knows it didn't come easy, I'm sure. I mean, I failed a whole lot in my work. I don't know about you, if you just did that stepping stone, one right on top of the other, but
I think the first question would be why. Why you want to be a leader?
Yeah.
I mean, it's really a pain in the ass.
And who do you want to lead? Yeah.
It's like I wrote a book with Chris Warner, as one of the top rescue climbers, and I just finished climbing with him in the Andes, and he was going to take on the NBC project for K2, which is the most dangerous mountain in the world. It's got a 10 times higher death rate. And so we did a great book live while he was summiting. And so we wrote this book called High Altitude Leadership. And we start off with like, leadership sucks. I mean, if you really think this is like all going to be fun and games, I'd really take a step back and say, do I really want to lead? And I started doing some research on this, and I found like a lot of leaders became leaders like against their will, and like just happen to be in a situation where it's like, whoa, wait a minute. So I was looking at other memo situations, and I want to do more research on this. This is very anecdotal, but it was funny. I was a couple of things. I had a couple of corgis, and I dropped them off at daycare, corgi daycare thing, a bunch of dogs. And I asked her, I said, how did the new dogs integrate with like, I'm like, who's the alpha? And she says something interesting. She goes, nobody wants to be the alpha. I said, what? He goes, yeah, it's a pain because you got all these dogs running around after you. You can't relax. And so it's like they'd rather just not be. So it's almost like the alpha is the loser choice. I thought that is really, really interesting. And then I did a lot of dog sledding over the years, just as a sideline whenever I was out west somewhere. And I found like as you're running dog sled teams, like there was this popular cocky management consultant or keynote speaker thing. Well, if you're not the lead dog, the view never changes. Thinking like you're always looking at somebody's butt. However, these people have never run a dog sled team.
Yeah.
If they know that no, actually, that's the hardest job. Because if you think somebody's staring at your butt, you are totally
Mistaken there.
these dogs are all over the place. I mean, one's pulling this way, one's pulling that way, and they're trying to balance the team so they don't pull too much. The freaking lead dogs are trying to keep everybody on the trail, and these other dogs is looking around, barking, having a good time. So I'm thinking, what, being the leader sometimes isn't all it's cracked up to be. So maybe the first thing to ask is why. Why do you want to be a leader?
I think a lot of people don't want to be leaders for all of those reasons. They want to be able to just follow and do their own thing and have a good time. And I enjoy that a lot myself, just having a good time. But every now and then we do need to lead. So that's a great question. Why? Why am I stepping into this position at this moment in time? As a parent.
If people are feeling guilty or pressured and you don't want to lead, I'm thinking, relax. There's nothing wrong with that leading, because number one, we need more followers than leaders. And that's one of the things we don't educate well on, is how to be a great follower. Yeah. Because that's where the power is, and the leader with great followers is a blessing. But it's a pain when you don't have that. And so leadership is not the popular, theme I think that people should focus their whole lives on. Now, on the other hand, if you have a purpose that you want to lead into, if you have something that you really want to organize and bring other humans along, or maybe you're pushed into that position because of your job, or like maybe somebody saw something in you like they saw in me, and you're like, what is that about? And next thing you know, you're in a leadership role. What I also found out from, and again, I test these ideas across tens of thousands of CEOs, is that we're teaching leadership wrong, because we're teaching that followers follow leaders, and they don't. And I found this out when Apple was using some of our work, and my colleague Cameron Lugman was pioneering this look at innovation in the brain, because Steve Jobs had died. And when he died, they wrote all these books about Steve Jobs and what they say about his management style. It was like an asshole. I mean, he was dismissive. He was this, he was that. It was like everything we teach in management school not to do, he did. Mm-hmm. So I think a really interesting question for leadership training is, why does a guy, and he's only one of many that we ended up researching, why does a guy who violates what we teach in leadership school, how does he create the most powerful company in the world? And what are we missing about leadership? And no one's ever asked that question. I'm thinking, that's the question, isn't it? Mm-hmm. How does a person that's a total asshole create something so powerful? And we found out it's because we're teaching leadership wrong, that our research found out that people don't follow leaders. They're following what the leader's up to. They're following their story. they're following, we use a term called a compelling saga or a winning saga. That story that is so passionate that for this challenge ahead, that people are willing to suffer and sacrifice with you to achieve it. So I always ask CEOs, what's the story you represent? What's the saga you embody? Because your followers are following that. And that is why you see these people, these guys, you think, well, they're not great leaders. They're violating all these protocols. It's like, no, they are, because the followers are following them into battle. And that's what we should be teaching. How do we create our own personal passion for something we want to achieve, and get people to follow that story?
And I love that. I love that you bring it up, because it is that story. I think the great leaders, the really great leaders, I don't know about Steve Jobs, but he had wonderful followers that were great leaders. But in order to make that all happen. But let me know what you think. I find that good leadership is caring for the people who are following you and making sure that they are doing their best. When they are doing their best and moving forward, and they're put in the right positions, and you know what's going on, that's when you're really a good leader. That's when people stand out. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think to bring out the fullest potential in people for the level they're at is important. And I think because obviously, why would you want to have a team to achieve a result with substandard people who have a passion? I mean, obviously, you don't want a team that has everybody online, doing their best. And I think that's important to do. And it was interesting that when I looked at people that were following, like, General Patton, and Forbes, I think it was Forbes, did an article on this topic. And I wish I could remember the title of it, on how these, I think it was something about jerks. Like, how do these successful people, why are they such jerks? And again, I think it was because people were following the story. I mean, like, they just published, like, Mother Teresa was an asshole. I'm like, what, Mother Teresa? So you can Google it, but the point is, people were following what they were up to. And I think once you got that down, then yeah, making sure your followers are fully engaged, and also care for them to achieve the potential they can in that journey.
That's the key.
Don't go too far. In other words, sometimes it's like, well, I mean, unless you're running a country club, it's like, oh, well, they're not happy. It's like, well, sometimes the greatest battles are won when you're not happy, and it's sometimes life requires sacrifice to achieve greater things. And so if you're sitting around wondering, is everybody happy? I don't know. I mean,
Well, yeah, exactly. You want them to be happy enough or content enough, but mostly it's the story, isn't it? It's a story that they want to follow. They want to. I go back, as we were talking to my dad. My dad was a colonel in the Army, and he lifelong. He fought in all three, whatever they're called, in Europe and Africa and the Pacific during World War II. And I had the great opportunity to hear what a leader he was. I mean, he was my dad. He was wonderful. He was fantastic. I had the best dad. And I didn't know anybody who didn't love him anyway. But to hear somebody that he commanded speak up about him and how he changed their lives with his leadership.
yeah.
He demanded that they follow the orders. I mean, this is the military. You follow the orders. You do what you have to do. This is what's put out. But you can do it with a loving heart.
Mm-hmm. And again, the story's clear in that situation. What they're following, why they're doing what they're doing. The compelling saga is pretty clear. And people like your dad are in situations where, Yeah, there's not a lot of gray area. Here's why we're here, you know, and and that's important. But when you look throughout history, like a great movie, if you haven't seen Madame Curie, um, the woman who discovered radiation. Okay, it's
Mhm.
a popular movie, but in the movie, you can just see, yeah, she was a jerk. You know, I mean, she pissed off people unnecessarily. But she was so focused on the story, her what she was up to, the discovery, that she attracted people that were around her to support her to make things happen. And of course, you know, she wins a couple Nobel prizes. It's kind of a neat idea, and but her breakthrough transformed us. I mean, as a society, when you look at radiation and how we use it
Mhm.
for good and bad. It's just a good example of what we're talking about. You know, leadership occurring around what you're up to, not around you as a person.
Exactly. So it's basically, if I'm understanding correctly, um, have the passion, know your why,
Yeah,
and others will follow
yeah,
happily. Is that, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I,
And
I, and that is such a great tip. And that people listening, this is magnificent, because when you know your why, when you are following your passion, the people around you start to change. It's the law of attraction, and you start attracting the people and the ideas. And I know that is so. I've seen it happen in my own life and my own work. When I finally got my passion down, oh, it was so much fun, because people started following me, and the people that were holding me back, I thought were holding me back, were not. They just needed to see a different me. And that's what a leader
mhm,
does. That's what you're doing too. And I love that, Don. So,
thank you.
uh, how how can people get in touch with you if they want more of your wisdom or your books? Or
Thanks. Well, we have a probably the main website, which I'm trying to force everything into this now because we have this new book coming in on how to win by losing more powerfully, which is, you know, my life has been a series of losses that I learned so much from, and we should teach how to lose better. You know what I mean? I think that's where the real learning. And when you're on an entrepreneur, like if you're a leader that happens to be in that space, there's so much risk that your life is full of those opportunities of learning, meaning, you know, failing, losing, making mistakes. And it's something that should be embraced, not avoided, because how you're being in that defines who you are in the future. So anyway, the website is Saga Leadership. So we took the Viking term that I stole from the Vikings, the compelling saga. And I have a website called Saga Leadership, SAGA leadership.com. And I'm trying to put everything there, and some of our online courses that I'm starting to get into now using the media for delivering online stuff. So I have something on how to slay dragons and how to become
oh, I love it. I
and
love it.
so I'm playing around with a lot of different things.
It sounds like, and just having this conversation with you, it sounds like it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Working and reading your stuff and learning from you is just an awful lot of fun. And that is number one in the Awesome Life Success. Is fun is number one. So I just truly have enjoyed being with you today and having your wisdom shared with all of our audience. And I can't thank you enough. Is there any last word that you might like to, or tidbit, or hope
Yeah,
for the world today?
I think you know, I mean, I love speaking to groups that are looking at this area of leadership and questioning. And I think you know, like I said before, you know, why do you want to do it? And if you want to do it, what are you up to? Because people are going to follow what you're up to. If you become thinking it's about you as a person, you know, it's deemed for failure, because there's so many things that can go wrong with that. But if you're up for a cause, up for a purpose, you got some power, and people like to follow people like that. And if you decide you want to be a follower, then do that well, because a lot of times, in fact, there's a great video. I wish you can YouTube this thing. It's called the First Follower, and
Ooh,
yeah, it's a rock concert, and some guys out there dancing alone, but the first follower comes up. Next thing you know, the entire freaking concert moves into this dance, and it was a really, really cool. I really, I don't know who did it. I've seen it. I thought it was a brilliant demonstration.
Oh, I'll look that up and put that in the show notes as well
Yeah.
as the sagaleadership.com. So you can access Don and reach out, because he is an amazing person. And people don't say that people with ADHD have a disability. It's just a little bit of learning difference. And we're all unique, right? We're all
And in the
awesome.
whole book, I have a whole section on this because I've collected now from all of the greatest entrepreneurs. A lot of them have come out of the closet, and it's actually seen as and there's some. I mean, there's some publications out there, and some of the major business journals. That's like, if you don't have it, you're gonna have a harder time being an entrepreneur.
Isn't
It's
that
like a
fascinating?
requirement.
Oh, I love that.
It's like, you have to be a little crazy to do this, and they're showing that yes, you do. And so it's really redefining what it means. And so I'm interested to see how this stuff is coming out now in the mainstream business media.
I that is really cool. You see, he's a researcher, and that's what it's all. We need those researchers out there, and those authors, and those explorers, and Don is all of that and so much more. So I will put the information in the show notes below, and reach out to him. Go to sagaleadership.com. And Don, thank you so much for today. It has been a total pleasure, and I've learned a lot, a new view of what leadership is and what is the first question we want to ask. So thank you so much. And by the way, we're never a failure as long as we look at it as a learning opportunity, just like you said.
Mhm.
Bye-bye for now. And until next time, be awesome.